Romans chapter 1. Some people have actually asked me, why is it that Baptists do not clap after the special number? Well, it's not a sin. You're not going to die in the lake of fire. But Jesus says if you get praise of man, then you lose your reward in heaven. So you do not get praise of God. Jesus says, that's your reward. Enjoy it. Okay, so thank you, all of you that clapped. You took away my reward. Thanks. Alright, so today we're going to look at a few questions that some Christians have a hard time to answer. And there is no need to have a hard time. There is no struggle. It's not a mystery. And that is the question of what happens to a person that never heard the name Jesus. Maybe they grew up in the darkest part of Africa. Or maybe they lived in the darkest part of Mindanao before the gospel ever reached the Philippine Islands. What happened to those men who grew up their whole life, their whole village, their whole island, their whole entire nation, never had any exposure or access to the gospel? What happens to those people? Is it fair that they go to hell the same like everybody else who heard the gospel many times and rejected? Is it fair that they suffer the same punishment? How should they be allowed to go to heaven? What do they need to do? They never had any chance to even hear the gospel. Let's find out. So Romans chapter 1 verse 18. Paul answers this question for us. So the question is again, what about those people who never had the opportunity to hear the gospel? They did not have access to the gospel. They grew up maybe in a place in the jungle or some kind of far out remote island where there was no evangelist to come and share the gospel with them. How is it that God is just? How is it just that God would send them to hell? Is that really just? Because God says He is just. He is a just God. Is it justice if God sends people to hell who never had a chance to even hear the name Jesus? Romans chapter 1 verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. So a lot just happened right here. So let's kind of break this verse down. It's really packed with a lot of things. The first thing it says, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. So we know where heaven is, and it says from heaven is the wrath of God revealed. How many of you have seen heaven? I have not. Hey, how many of you have seen heaven? Any prophets? Any apostles here that can speak and say, I had a vision, brother? We'll have you come and tell us about your vision. Michael, no vision from you, no dream last night, nothing? Okay, we don't have heaven. So this is not talking about the heaven where the throne of God is. It's talking about the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets. Talking about the sky. When you look up and you see the heavens. And when you look up there, it says, what do you see in this verse? What do you see? The wrath of God. Well, that's kind of strange, don't you think? Did you ever look up in heaven and say, oh, there's wrath? Did God's eyebrows kind of go down like this at you? Right? It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against how much of the ungodliness and righteousness of men is God's wrath revealed? All. God's wrath is revealed, it's made known, it's not kept a secret to all of man's unrighteousness and ungodliness. So if there's let's say a person in the middle of an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far, far, far away from the closest Christian, far, far, far away from any evangelist or pastor or believer at all. There's no Bible on the island. There's no Bible in the islands around that they have contact with. and that person looks up at the heavens, the Bible says, and he's going to understand that there is a God, and that God is angry with that person. And guess what? It's the same to you and me. There was a time in our lives when God revealed His wrath to us. It says, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. That means all of us have the truth that we need. We hold it. When did we get the truth? What? Before, this is all men. All men don't get saved. So when is it that we take hold of a certain truth? Think about this verse. There's a point in time where something happens. What happens? They look up at the stars, and what do they see? The wrath of God. And the wrath of God reveals that there's a God that's angry at you because of your unrighteousness and your ungodliness. So when a person dies who is lost, and they stand before God, and God says, I'm sorry, but I need to send you to hell. And that's only fair. And they say, but God, I never knew that you hated my ungodliness. I never knew you were angry because of my unrighteousness. This verse says, yes, you did. Even you look up at the stars and you say there must be a creator. There must be someone that made these stars. And because that person that made these stars is an orderly and designed and perfect God, I understand now that I'm not perfect and that I have an unrighteousness and ungodly life. And my decisions violate what I look upon as a perfect and orderly God. So no one can stand before God and say, I never knew you were angry with me. Because right here, God says, actually, you did. You knew my wrath was upon you. You knew that truth. What is the truth here that all men hold? Look at this verse. What is it? What is the truth that they hold? They hold on to the truth, it says. They hold on to it in unrighteousness. That means they have the truth, but they refuse to act upon it. They take that truth and they twist it into something else. And we will talk about that. But first of all, what is the truth that all men have? Believers, unbelievers, people who have heard the gospel, never heard the gospel, all men have this truth. What is it? Come on, say it louder. I think you're all getting it, but yes, that God is angry at me. Every person knows that God is angry at me. You can go knock on every door and say, did you know that God is angry at you? Every single person. If they're telling the truth, here it says so, they will answer yes. I know. God is angry at me. I've known that since I looked up at the stars. I've known that since I came to the understanding that there's a creator who made this universe. But it says they hold the truth in what? In what? Unrighteousness. So, now that everyone has the truth, now that everyone knows that God is angry with them because of their ungodliness and their unrighteousness, they hold on to that truth. They cannot unlearn it. They cannot forget it. They can deny it all they want, but they know deep down, they know that there is a God that's mad at them. That's why they want to get God off of the coins, removing God we trust. They want to get God out of the schools. They want to get God out of the science textbooks. They want to get God out of our politics, out of the culture. His name should be removed from off the face of the earth. Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, those are fine. Why? Because the wrath of Santa Claus is not revealed from heaven. But the wrath of God is. They hold that truth, but they hold it in unrighteousness. That means they take that truth that they hold, that they know is true, that they do not forget, and what do they do with it? They say, because God is angry at me, I need to do something that is unrighteous because of His wrath. Now let me give you an example. In Papua New Guinea, there were tribes where an evangelist went to, and the tribes would have every year, they had some kind of war game. And what they would do is they would take spears and arrows, and they would lunge them at each other. These two tribes would come together in a set place once a year, and they would shoot arrows, throw spears, until one person on one of those two tribes bled. Once one of them bled, they would put their arms down, their weapons down, and they would go back to their normal life. And the evangelist said, what are you guys doing? And they said, because without the shedding of blood, the gods are angry. The shedding of blood must happen to make the God pleased, to satisfy the God. They understood what? They understood that God was angry with them. The evangelist never told them about Jesus and the blood of Jesus Christ. But they understood that there must be something to make God satisfied in His wrath. So what they did by throwing the spear, and sometimes people died. Sometimes the spear would hit him in the chest or the neck or the lungs. And then sometimes, most of the time, it would just be a flesh wound and the person would survive. But the point is, they were taking the truth that they knew that God was angry at them because of their unrighteousness, because of their ungodliness, and they said, we will hold on to that truth because we cannot deny it, but we will hold on to it in an unrighteous way. And so they invented these war games to draw blood. And of course the evangelist said, look guys, someone already shed the blood. There is now peace for all people, for all years, for all days, for all of forever. You don't need to shed blood anymore. God's wrath can be satisfied in the blood of Jesus Christ. That would be holding the truth in righteousness. But what were they doing? They were holding that truth in unrighteousness. You can go to any church in this area and you can find at these churches, what are they doing? They're taking and they believe the wrath of God. They cannot deny that God is angry. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to please that God by doing good works. They're trying to please that God by reducing His wrath against them by their works. That is holding the truth that God is angry in unrighteousness. So even the person in a far out island has that truth that God is mad at them. Now let's look at the next verse. Because that which may be known of God is manifest. That means wide open for all the people to see. Because that which may be known of God is manifest where? 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 In them. Uh-oh. So that means in their very heart, in their soul, what is known? What is shown? Right there it says, because that which may be known of God. That which may be known. So if you want to know God, if you want to know what may be known of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, how you can be saved, how you can please the God who is angry, the God who is full of wrath because of unrighteousness and ungodliness, it's inside here. You have the truth in you. And you show forth to others, whether you like it or not, that truth. It's like talking to an atheist. There's a joke. The joke goes like this. You probably don't even do a laugh, okay? Don't even laugh at mine. No, you're just trying to be nice to me. Don't even laugh, okay? But the joke goes, how do you know if someone is atheist? Don't worry, they'll tell you, because they're all loudmouths, right? So, what are they doing? By atheists, they're the loudest preachers in the whole world. They have the biggest megaphone, louder than those Satan worshippers down below us, okay? They have the loudest, biggest voices with the biggest speakers. The atheists do. You cannot go into a room without them telling you that they are an atheist. What are they doing? They are revealing the truth that there is a God and that God's wrath abides upon that person, and they cannot live with that thought. They're trying to fight against that thought, overcome that idea, that truth, but they still hold that truth. They cannot wash it away. They cannot get rid of it. The truth is in them, and it's manifest. It's known. They by whom? By them. So in other words, how do you know if there's a God? Just go look at an atheist. They're going to prove that there is a God. You look at some of the most famous atheists in the world. They'll teach you the foolish things they say, the suicide rate, the depression, the drugs that they go to. That's going to prove God. Why? Because of how they live their life and what words they use, and their lifestyles and their choices. So manifest in every person, it is known, even those that hold the truth in unrighteousness, that there is a God that is angry. Okay? So now let's go to verse 20. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. How many of you can see something invisible? Okay? Here the Bible says you can see invisible things. Ever since the creation of the world, there were things that were invisible that we can see. So, let me give you an example. How many have ever seen love? See it all the time, right? You don't see it with these eyes. You see it with these eyes in here, with your soul. You can see love. How many of you have ever seen wrath? Come on, guys! Really, never? There, are you seeing wrath? Okay. How many of you have ever seen hope? Pag-asa. How many of you have ever seen hope? We've seen it. How many of you have ever seen depression, discouragement, sin, salvation? These are things we don't see with these eyes. These are things we see with what is deep inside of every person. The invisible things of God. The love of Jesus Christ, the wrath of God. We see those. We hold that truth. We see the invisible things of God. We see them. How? Verse 20. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So that person that goes before God and says, God, I lived in, the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Everyone in my island, there was nobody that knew or heard the gospel or even knew the name Jesus. We thought that there was some great sun god or fish god or tree god or wind god or whatever. Mama Mary god, whatever you want to call it, rock music god. We believed that was the God. I never knew about Jesus Christ. I never heard the gospel before. I have an excuse. And the Bible says, no, you don't. Because I revealed my wrath to you. And you saw the visible things. And when you saw those visible things, here God says you clearly saw the invisible things. How many of you have ever seen with these eyes? How many of you have seen the gospel? Good. How about here? There we see the gospel. And we can see the gospel here because we have seen what God has made here. For example, from the power of the Godhead in creation, you look out and you say stars, heaven, amazing, simply amazing. The earth, the trees, the flowers, a rose. Where did that come from? And we understand by seeing it, it has to have come from someplace, from someone powerful. And that leads us to understand the invisible things, that there is a great creator God out there. And that God is mad at us. Why? Because He created these things for a reason. And we are living in unrighteousness and ungodliness, and therefore God is mad at us. And what are we going to do with that truth? We hold it in unrighteousness. And those that are lost who hold that truth in unrighteousness, they are without excuse. So sometimes people will say, what about those people that never have heard or had a chance to hear the gospel? Here it says they are without excuse. Why? Because God has revealed His wrath. He has shown them nature. He has shown them the heavens. And what they chose to do with it determines what light God is going to give them. Let's say, for example, that there was an American Indian before Christopher Columbus. And he looked out into the stars and saw the trees and said, there must be a creator God. He must be mad at me. And so for that reason, I'm going to pray out to this great creator God and cry out and ask him to show himself to me. Do you think it would be just for God to say, no, I've already predestined you to hell? That's not justice. God will send someone if they ask. I had a person tell me one time, no missionary, no evangelist should ever go to the Philippines. They already have churches. That's not the standard of what God uses to send people. God sends evangelists, pastors. He sends them based on those that are the call, the cry. If there's no one crying out in one country with no church, and there's people crying out that does have churches already, but they're still crying out, maybe the churches are not doing a good job. God's going to send someone. You ask for light, God's going to give more light. So that is the measurement by which God sends forth those that teach the gospel. God sends evangelists where? Where there's a cry, where there's a call. Now let's look at the next verse. Some people say, well, what about those that are babies? We're all conceived. David said, in sin did my mother conceive me. His mom and dad were married, so it's not that fornication. He's saying that we are sinful by nature from the moment we are conceived in our mother's womb. Before you were born, you are sinful. You're a sinner. And so some people say, well, because we're sinners, from before we are even born, a baby that is miscarried or a baby that dies goes to hell. Or those who are retarded, that, their brain never quite works, even they're 50 years old, their mind is still like a 6-month-old baby. Okay? What about them? Where do they go? And some people say, well, they go to hell because they have sin. They have the sin nature, they've already sinned from Adam. So that's the punishment, they have to go to hell. So this next verse answers the question, where do babies go? Do babies go to heaven or do babies go to hell? Verse number 21. It says, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Look at the third word of that verse. What word is it? What's the third word in that verse? When. What does that mean, when? A point in time. A certain point in time. I'm going to the market. When are you going to a market? At a certain point in time. At 2 o'clock. At 1:30. That's a certain point in time. Here Paul is saying that God reveals his wrath at a certain point in time. What point in time does God reveal his wrath? Is it to some men or to all men? All men. What is that point in time? Well, how does a person receive the wrath of God revealed? What do they do? What? They're just walking down the sidewalk, whistling, having a good time. They look up at the heaven. Oh, God is mad at me. Can a baby that has not been born, can they receive the wrath of God revealed? No. They cannot look around at the things that are visible and understand the things that are invisible. They're not even born yet. Little Micah back there is 6 months old. That kid can't understand anything. So here Paul says there's a point in time in a person's life when God's wrath is revealed to them. And it's not at the moment they're conceived. It's not the day that they are born. It's sometime after they are born, obviously. Sometime after at the age where they can look around and understand there's a God out there He is mad at me. When you reach that age, some people call it the age of accountability, but that's not the Bible. But whatever that age is, that is when you are accountable to God. That means if you decide, I reject whatever this Creator God, He's mad at me, I know that truth now. When you know that truth, you better repent. And you better seek for the light. Seek the Creator God. But if you say, no, I'm going to hold that truth in unrighteousness. Maybe I believe I can save myself by doing good works, or I can buy God's favor, buy His grace through good works, or good works plus grace. I can combine those together, holding the truth in whatever unrighteous way. That person makes a choice. When they choose that, they are now accountable before God for their eternity. The Calvinists teach that if you're an elect baby, you go to heaven. If you're not one of the elect babies, then you go to hell. How silly is that? How many people does God reveal His wrath to? 19%? 28.5%? What percentage of people does God reveal His wrath to? All. All of them. Not the elect and non-elect. He reveals His wrath to all. So Paul said there's a certain point in time when God reveals His wrath to us. Let's look at one more verse here real quick in 2 Samuel 12:23. 2 Samuel 12:23. And David said, but now he is dead. Well, verse number 22. And he said, while the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, who can tell whether God will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. A lot of the Protestants and Calvinists and people who believe that babies generally do not go to heaven, because the Calvinists, they teach that David is talking about the land of the dead. David is going to die like the baby died. What comfort would that give you if you were David? Would that be any comfort to you at all? Well, I'm going to die just like that baby, so I'm comforted about that. No, that's no comfort. David is comforted. Why? Because he says, I'm going to see that baby again. We're going to be together again one day. Why? Because that baby had not had the wrath of God revealed to him. So David is not saying, I'm going to die like his baby died. That's what Protestants teach. David said, I'm going to see this baby again. I'm going to Hades. It's not some realm of the dead. That's an actual, literal, physical place in the center of the earth. And David says, we will, after I die, be together. I will see him. We will laugh together. We will smile together. We will embrace together. And David was comforted because the baby he would see, he would go to that baby. Not because he would die. That's not comforting. If there's a grieving mother here, I would not say, oh, don't be sad. Your baby died, but you're going to die too. Is this something I said? No, it's you get to be comforted. Why? Because you get to see your baby again. So this talks about verse 21, because that, back to Romans chapter 1, because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. So here you have, again, the idea of a person who has never heard the name Jesus. And God says, here's the truth, here's my wrath, what are you going to do with it? They said, I'm going to hold it in unrighteousness, and then I'm going to create a system, and because of my righteousness, because of my intellect, I'm going to be able to use this system to appease God. A Mormon this week who's talking to me about the 5 things that a Mormon needs to do to go to the celestial place. They don't believe in heaven, they believe in, it's complicated. But to go to the celestial place, you need to do the 5 things. What are they doing? They're professing themselves to be wise, and they're making themselves fools. because they're rejecting the invisible things of God, that God is mad at them, and saying, no, we just need to invent a new system and follow that system. And they're going to stand before God at the great white throne judgment after God brings them up out of hell to judge them. And God says, now I have to send you to Gehenna, the lake of fire. Because you thought that your system would satisfy my wrath. It's called propitiation, satisfaction of God's wrath. You hoped for propitiation in the system that you invented because you thought that you were so wise. How wise would you have to be to outthink and to outsmart God? To think that you would have to be pretty foolish. You'd have to be pretty foolish. So God says they profess themselves to be wise. You listen to atheists that say there is no God. And then you look at nature around you. Where did this come from? They say the foolish, stupidest things. But they say that they're the smartest people in the world. But they're fools. They're just silly children, baby-like little fools. Verse 23. What did they do? It says, and change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, birds, beasts, things, creeping things. Does this sound familiar? Do you know anyone that would do something that foolish? God is incorruptible. God is eternal. Is wood corruptible? Can that burn? Yeah, it can. What about the wood on these walls? If you take a skateboard and throw it against the walls, you're going to put a hole in the wall like RJ does? Yeah, RJ's going to put a hole. Why? It's corruptible. So if we take wood and we fashion it into an elephant, or we fashion it into a bird, guess what? It's going to corrupt. Guess what God does not do? God does not corrupt. So Paul is saying how foolish it is that those who would know the truth would practice idolatry. Take something that is corruptible and say, here is our God. When that thing that they call God is corruptible. So there is no excuse. On to verse 24. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own heart, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. So what does God say? He says, okay. If that's what you want to do, I'm not going to force you. You're not a robot. Here it teaches good, it teaches free will. God says, if you want to do that, then I will allow you the free will to do that. It's foolishness. I warn you not to do it. It breaks my heart. But I'm not going to control you as if you are a robot. So God, it says, gave them up to uncleanness. He gave them up. He says, okay, I'll let you do it if that's what you choose. But remember this is your choice. You chose to be unclean. So when anyone stands before God at the great white throne, they say, yeah, I was unrighteous. Yes, I was ungodly, but I did not know any better. God says, you decided this for yourself. You did know better. And then in verse 26, for this cause God gave them up. Verse 25. Who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. We see this quite often today, especially in Western civilization. We see in America, especially in Canada and Europe, you will see that you get punished more for harming the life of an animal than harming the life of a human. They care more about the creation, and they could not possibly care less about the Creator. It's against the law in America, punishable by prison, to harm an eagle's egg. Because eagles are noble animals. I don't think they are endangered anymore technically, but they used to be endangered. And so there's still prison time if you damage or harm an egg. Why? Because they said an egg is an unborn eagle. But if you were to kill, murder a baby, a human baby in the womb, they say that's fine. There's one politician in America, they asked her, I think it was Nancy Pelosi, I'm not sure, one of the most powerful politicians in America, They said, when do you think it's not okay to take the life of the baby in the womb? They don't call it baby, but that's what it is. It's a baby. And she said, it's okay to take and kill that life until they leave the doors of the hospital. Until they leave the hospital doors. And even one day after they're born, it's still okay to kill that baby. What's wrong with these people? Because they have turned the wisdom of God into the truth of God into a lie, and they have chosen to worship the creation more than the creation. That's why they don't. There's people. I don't teach cruelty to animals. Don't teach that. I think it is wrong. The Bible does say about treating an animal with kindness. Don't kill it unless it's to eat it. That sort of thing. Or if it gets in the way. The purpose of animals is to please mankind. And it shouldn't be so you can torture that animal. That should not bring you pleasure. I know it doesn't to me. But it's just an animal. It's not a human. It's okay that an animal will die. That's their purpose, is to please man. That's why God made them. For our pleasure. If we want to eat them, we can eat them. If we want to see them die like a cockroach, we can let them die. It's not to torture them, but it's okay. They're just animals. But people have elevated animals higher than God. They think that taking the life of an animal is worse than taking the life of a human, made in the image of God. So we can see that they serve the creature more than the Creator. 2 more verses. Verse 26. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. God says, you do whatever you want. And when God steps back, what will be the result? What will come out of man's heart? Without God, what comes out of your heart? Vile things or not vile things? Vile things, like the violin, right? Just kidding, nothing to do with that. Vile means wicked and evil and terrible. Like murder is vile. Bank robbery is vile. Something extremely, terribly wicked. What's in our heart? Vile things. It says, for this cause God gave them up into vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. In other words, girls were liking girls. In animals, you see where the girl bird and the boy bird, they like to get together and make a couple, make a family, right? Do you ever see a girl bird and another girl bird try and make a family? No, nature says that is not how nature works. God who made nature says, no, that's not how it works. They did a study one time, and they took 2 male penguins and they put an egg in the cage at the zoo of those 2 male penguins. And you know what those 2 male penguins did? They kept that egg alive. They took turns keeping the egg warm, and they kept the egg alive. And you know what all the scientists said? Bakla. That's what they said. They said, oh, you see, even animals are bakla. No. Nature teaches us that that's not right. Nature teaches us that that is wrong. But here, even nature teaches us things. And man says, I'm going to go against the obvious, plain, invisible things that I see from here. You see the point what Paul is making? First he says there's invisible things that you can see. Where do you look to see those things? You look to nature. Look around. Look to the heavens. Look to the trees. Look to the animals. And what does it teach you? It teaches you what? God is angry with you. There's a perfect God and you're not perfect. There's an orderly and powerful designer, creator God. What else does it teach you? It teaches you that girls like boys and boys like girls, and there's no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you look to nature, that's what it teaches you. That's what you see. But what were some of these women doing? They were seeing the things that were visible in nature, and they're saying, no, I'm going to corrupt it and pervert what I know by nature. I know, I can see it. I can see the invisible things. I know what the body is intended for, and I'm going to pervert that purpose. And that goes against even the things that you can see in nature. And verse 27 it says, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burn in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient. And gives us a list of all the things that's wicked that people do. Where can you go and you point to and say what you're doing is wicked? You go to a bakla and you say, bakla, the Bible says, Romans chapter 1, that what you're doing is wicked and evil. And the bakla can say, well, I don't believe the Bible. You can still say, but you know it's wrong. Why is it that the bakla makes such a big deal about getting married? We want you to say, in America they made laws called civil union, the rights to a civil union. That means you get all of the legal benefits of marriage, 100%, exactly the same, on your benefits at your work, through your employer, even private employer, government employer. Still the unions were recognized, and they said you can marry however you want, whatever you want, and it will be recognized in a civil union. And they said, no, we don't want that. What we want is for you to call what we do, we want you to call it marriage. It was not good enough. They said, we want you to approve what we are doing, as if it's the same as what the others are doing. Guess what? So they did. The Supreme Court of the United States a few years ago said, okay, girls, boys, you guys can marry whatever you want, and you can call it marriage, and no one can tell you otherwise. Do you think they're happy now? They're not happy. Do you think they feel like that what they're doing is okay now? They don't feel like that. They still feel like they're doing something wrong. They reject everything in the Bible. They don't believe any of it. And yet, they still know that what they're doing wrong. Where did they learn that from? Even nature teaches that what they do is wrong.